Hello everyone, Rick Thomas here. Thank you for joining me for this video. I'm going to do something different here. I'm going to build out a mind map for you. I use the MindNode software, and what I'm going to be talking about in this video is this battle over naming our problems and providing the answers. There are two competitors for helping someone. There is the secular psychologist or the secularist, and there is the biblical counselor, Christian counselor, the disciple maker. And so those are the two competing entities. And so in this mind map that I'm building here, I'm going to call it the battle over naming our problems and providing the answers. I call this a false continuum, meaning just because somebody can describe what is going on in your life, it doesn't necessarily mean that they also can provide the answers. There's a lot of people that can describe things that they are observing in someone, but it doesn't mean that they should be the authority on bringing the solution. And so in this mind map, we're going to take a look at a glance where we are going. There are three parts to it. Number one here is we have a person with a physical problem. We're talking about a medical issue here, and I'll speak briefly to that because sometimes you do have people with medical problems, but as it's noted here, that there is a spiritual component to truly organic problems, and I'll talk about that in a second. And then the second part of the mind map is the person does have a soul problem. Let's say a person comes to you and there's something internally, his soul, that's wrong. That's a non-organic spiritual aspect. And of course, he has two options as far as counselors. I call it the secularist and the biblical counselor. And then number three, depending on which counselor the person chooses, it will determine the outcome of those meetings. And so number one is dealing with an organic physical problem. Now, we as counselors, we don't interact with that as far as the actual objective physical problem. Number two, if there's a spiritual issue, well, that's where biblical counselors or psychologists would come into play. And then number three, I'm going to talk about the results of biblical counseling versus a psychologist. And so this is the at-a-glance aspect of this mind map that I am building. Now, let me give you my summary statement. I've already said this, but it can be a false assumption to say that if they can describe what is happening to me, if they understand what is going on, well, then they also have the answer. And that might not be true. By the way, that might not be true for a biblical counselor or a psychologist. Not all biblical counselors can bring proper solutions, even though they may be able to describe the problem. Now, in the sake of this video, the mind map that I'm building, we're saying that the problem that the person is having is real. And so the secularist and the biblicist, we don't disagree. We don't disagree. The person is having a real problem. Now, the first aspect of this is an organic problem. This is a medical issue, and this is not something that a psychologist or a biblical counselor would address. If it's an objective, measurable, organic, physical problem. And so regardless of which direction you go, whether you're dealing with a psychologist or dealing with a biblical counselor, if you're going north here on the mind map, I'm going to talk about a psychologist. If you're going south, I'll be talking about a biblical counselor. But regardless, if you have a medical problem, you need a medical doctor. We do not give medical advice. And so the person has a real physical problem in this illustration. Now, it is true that the secularist will collaborate with the medical doctor because we are a dichotomy. And so if you're having some physical problem, you're probably going to be struggling with anxiety or fear or some kind of spiritual issue. And so if you're struggling that way, which is pretty normal, by the way, Then in addition to a medical doctor to deal with the physical problem, you probably want to see what I would recommend, a biblical counselor, because you are a dichotomy. And so for the secularist, he will collaborate with the doctor. The doctor will work on the physical issues, the organic problems, and then the psychologist will deal with the anxieties or fears or whatever is going on as far as the soul is concerned. Now, again, the reason for that is because we are a dichotomy, body and soul. It would be hard to have a physical problem, an objective, measurable physical problem, and not struggle at the level of your soul. But you always want to separate these. Again, biblical counselors don't deal with body problems, and I trust that a secular counselor would also have a similar position. But you can collaborate with a doctor, and so that is what is going on here. And so I'm going to take everything that's at the top of this mind map on the secular side of the mind map, which is the top side, and then I'm going to bring it down to the bottom part, which is the biblical counseling part, and it'll be the same thing. And so a person comes in, they're having an objective, measurable, organic, physical problem, and they're seeing a doctor for it, but they also want some biblical counseling because they're struggling at the level of their soul. And so they have a non-organic problem, and then they also have an organic problem, and because we are a dichotomy, and so we meet or we deal with both of those. Again, this is MindNode software. There is a link in the video. This is how I build all of my mind maps. I've been doing it for years, and I have a bunch of mind maps on our website as well on all sorts of things. I've used this in counseling to help a person to see visually what is happening to them, and it has been very instructive. All right, so point number one is the person with a medical organic problem. All right, now we're going to deal just with the soul side of what is happening, and this is where we do have two clear views, and the two views are different, and they send you in different directions. And the first view, or the first step, or the mile marker, you might say, as you're dealing with soul problems, is the person's presupposition. And so a secularist or a psychologist would be beholden to evolution. Your presupposition will it'll not only determine how you began, but it'll determine the process, and it will determine the result as well. Now, a biblical counselor would believe in total depravity, that we are broken, fallen people, the noetic effect of sin is in place, and that we need help. And what we would say, we have two Bibles here, as you see on the screen, and we would say that the Bible is our authority, but the culture also has a Bible too, the Diagnostic Statistical Manual, number 5. I did not put the 5 here because that number changes, and I want this video to be good 100 years from now. And so they have had 5 versions of the DSM, and there will be 6, 7, and 8 as well. But your presupposition, it will determine your starting point. And from an evolutionistic presupposition, you're going to be beholden to a DSM, the culture's Bible, as you address non-organic problems. The Christian believes in total depravity. He will be beholden to the sufficiency of Scripture as authoritative to deal with non-organic problems. Now, the secularists will tell you you have a disorder, and this is where the dichotomy part of the medical doctor above, I was talking about the soul side of an organic problem. Well, that's how it connects, as you see on the mind map. And it will connect similarly as well here. And so the dichotomy, as the person with a physical problem is dealing with the soul side of their struggle, again, that connects. And we would say they have a spiritual or soul problem. Of course, the secularists would say they have a disorder. All right, so those are the two views, number 2. And now number 3 is both of us can accurately describe the problem. The secularist looks at the problem and he describes it. And that's what the DSM 4 or 5 is. It's just a book of descriptions. That's all it is. And so they accurately describe it. And this is the false assumption, because you could say, well, if they can describe my problem, then they obviously know what the solution is, and that's not necessarily true. And so After they describe the problem, they'll give you a DSM label, some kind of acronym. And the individual who's hearing that will place authority and hope in that label, ADHD, PTSD. And again, as I said earlier, it's not that these problems aren't real, but it's the battle over naming the problems and providing the answers. And so they give you a label, and that will lead to a solution. And invariably, the solution will be medication, because that's the only answer that they really have. And there are three reactions to that. There is recovery, relief, and results. You can have some recovery, you can have some relief, and you can get results as far as a change in behavior. And I would call this pragmatism. And some people, it's like, that's just good enough for me. I just want relief. I just want some kind of recovery. I want some kind of results. That is pragmatism, but it's not transformation. Now, as you move to the bottom of the screen, we should be able to accurately describe what we are observing, but rather than giving it a DSM label, because we're working from the Bible, we give them biblical truth, and they see that as the authority. And similar to the DSM, they have hope. But again, it moves in a different direction. And so from that biblical truth, we give a solution, and our solutions look different. Now, all of our solutions are empowered by grace. I say empowering grace because grace has an action to it. It moves us in a clear direction. And so you're empowered by grace to change. You're empowered by grace to persevere. If you change, it could be redemption. A person could get saved. If you change, it could be restoration, where you are better. As far as empowered to persevere, you may be in an unchangeable situation, or I say you have an external source. And what I mean by external source, you don't have any control over it. It is something that is happening to you. And so if you're empowered to change, you can be saved and you can experience restoration. But you also, God gives you the grace to persevere, because you're in an unchangeable situation, or there's an external thing that it's not you that's causing the problem, someone else is, or something else is causing the problem. But either, whether it's change or perseverance, God gives you the grace to do it. Now, this is the mind map, and again, you can go on our website, rickthomas.net, and you can find it. You can download the PDF, and you can use it in your teaching. And so you have a video here. You have a podcast in the show notes. They're all linked here. There's a link to the mind map software if you want to play around with it. And also, if you have any questions for me, there is a link to a community forum where we can talk about this. Thank you so much for watching the video. Oh, by the way, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. So before you leave, subscribe so that you can keep up and be abreast of all the videos that we produced. Thank you so much for watching.